So today on the show we have Neil D'Souza. He's kind of an expert in private lending. I think that's a great way for people who maybe aren't ready to take the leap into real estate. I tell people all the time, real estate's great for creating wealth. It's not great for getting rich quick, and a lot of people I think believe that. This is an angle where I think there's, it's an easier way to do it, and the money turns over probably a little quicker. So he can get into that. For people who don't, like if they're not in real estate and private lending, they probably don't understand what that actually is. Could you give a brief description of what that looks like normally?
Oh, absolutely. Well, private lending is private. You're an individual, and lending is you're lending money. Now, normally we talk about private mortgages. A mortgage is as simple as any loan that's applied against real estate. If it's a loan, it's against real estate, you call it a mortgage. And this was not an idea that the banks came up with, right? Everyone says, oh, you get a mortgage from the bank. The banks took it from us. They took it from us. They were like, hey, we make all this money. What if we institutionalize this and started creating this entire system for lending money? And of course, they started by lending your money and my money when we would put in deposits. Now they don't even need to do that. They can lend money that they don't even have. Now, for you and I, we don't have that. We're not creating fictitious money, taking deposits, able to lend 10 times that amount. We're lending our own money, and we're securing it against real estate and giving people a mortgage, whether it be a first mortgage, a second mortgage, which just means whichever loan comes first is the first mortgage, whichever loan comes second, that's a second mortgage. So like the one you get from the bank, that's a first mortgage. You get a line of credit, that's actually a second mortgage. One of the great things a lot of people don't know about private lending, about private mortgages, is that the government allows you and I to use our registered funds, right? RRSPs, TFSAs, all of these types of things. They allow us to use registered money to be able to lend on mortgages. We know what happens. If you don't pay the bank your mortgage, what happens? And they're going to come take the house, sell it, get their money back. And so that's the beauty of private mortgages. It's extremely simple. There's nothing complicated to it.
To use registered funds, though, do you have to go through someone who has a trust or something, or can someone just go to the bank, say, "Hey, I want to use this," and
you people ask me that one. That's an interesting one. Why can't you go to the bank? Well, because they're actually a competitor. They're your competitor, and so because of course they lend they lend money. They give out mortgages, and so what you have to do is you have to transfer those funds, say from a mutual fund. If you've got your RSPs or your LIRA or whatever into a mutual fund, you move them over to a trust company, and there's a few different ones out there. You would have them transferred over. They stay inside an RRSP, TFSA, whatever. They stay in that product with this trust company. And the trust company has one sole job: to track that money and make sure that they advise the government of any tax implications. And but of course, if your money is inside a registered fund, we know that it's a non-taxable event. It's only when you take that money out that the government will start to tax it. So yes, you move it over to a trust company, an authorized trust company, and then they're able to administer it on your behalf.
But then are you free to go? Like once it moves to the trust company, can they give it to just some guy who's flipping houses and do a mortgage, or does it have to then go to someone who actually is able to take registered funds?
Okay, so there's two sides to this. Now the one side is, if you move it over to a trust company, and you can either do self-directed or you can have a company doing it for you. And, like putting it into a fund that then lends it out on your behalf. Or a lot of people, obviously this is why I've been teaching people for a decade, is a lot of people want that control. They want to be able to take their money and put it in and out of deals. So they'll move it to a self-directed registered savings plan so that they can actually lend it out. And so one of the things I facilitate for people as being a licensed mortgage agent is I'm able to bring them opportunities where they can decide if they want to lend on it or not. And then they've got some guidance between lawyers, myself, and the like to be able to know if what they're doing it makes sense for their situation.
When they go the self-direct route, though, like they could technically buy a property and loan themselves the money for the mortgage, or can you not?
Ooh, no, you can't do that. Can't do that. That's what's called a non-arm's length mortgage, which is not allowed. The government won't allow you to take registered funds, lend it on a property for yourself, and so for that reason, you can't do that. Now, people have gone to elaborate means to try to game the system. I don't advise it because, of course, the government will come for you. So you're lending these at non-arm's length, at arm's length. Sorry. So someone you don't know, you're not related to, that type of deal, so that there is no conflict of interest there. Because otherwise, there could be kickbacks. Right, there could be kickbacks. There could be other types of interest that you get. Perhaps if you lending it to your uncle, or your cousin. Now they might say, "Well, we'll give you part ownership on this property. We just won't tell the government about it." So as a result, the government doesn't allow you to do that.
Just for people who don't know, like I've seen, all different ranges of returns on these kind of things, but it's usually higher than bank rates. Like what's someone expecting if they go to do this and they're doing a private mortgage? What's kind of that range of interest, or what are they expecting to get?
Yeah, okay. There's 1,000 different ways to structure a deal, and what you can charge. You can charge 4%. You get to choose. Right now, whether there is a market for what you're charging these days, and I would say typically, if you can be in around that 10% mark, depending on what interest rates are doing, above, below, you're winning all the way through. Right, to be able to get 10% solid every year, that's sort of the goal. I try to teach people, if you can stay within that 10 to 12% range, you're doubling. How quickly can you double your money is going to be roughly every 5 to 7 years, right? If for those that understand compounding interest, you're going to be able to double your money roughly every 5 to 7 years, and so then it just becomes a game of how many doubling periods can I get in there. Now you might do deals like when interest rates drop down. You could get a bank mortgage for 1.25. You're not going to be able to lend out your private money, say at 10% on a first mortgage. You might get it at 6 or 8, but you're consistently going to beat the market.
And usually these are shorter term too, right? Like they're not giving a 30-year loan. You're giving it's usually two years, something like that, 6 months.
Well, yeah, it depends. Like if you're doing a flip, let's say you were flipping a property, and you might only want that money for 4 months. Now, in that situation, I might be able to charge a significantly higher amount, or I might not charge you monthly interest. Instead, I put it all to the back end because you and I know, hey, I know you, Shane's going to take this property, and I know he knows what he's doing. He's going to take it, he's going to raise the value, and then he's going to sell it. And Shane and I make a deal that you're going to give me X percentage at the end of the 4 months, which is higher than I would get if I charged you monthly interest. So I'm going to wait for 4 months and get my money at that point. Or you've got people who are doing debt consolidations, and now they're looking for a year to 2 years. Normally, the standard industry is a year. But let's say you're doing a year, and now they've improved their credit scores. They're going back to the bank, refinancing, and then paying you back your money. And then you take your money and you move on to the next deal.
And so for people like you talked about, how you kind of got onto the entrepreneur path, and it started with books, which would be very similar to me, and it was going to conferences and seeing people more successful than I knew existed, and realizing they weren't that smart. That was all part of it. But what someone, what do you think is that for? Is it books, podcasts, courses, or do you have any recommendations for people to kind of take that first step?
Ooh, recommendations for people to take the first step. Well, if they're listening to you right now, that is the first step, right there. You're there. You're wondering, can I do this? Will this work for me? You're trying to decipher through all of that. So, first of all, anyone listening to this, congratulations. You've really already taken the first step. And so now the next step, I think, really is dependent on the person. But there's nothing that beats taking action, taking some type of action. And the best thing that I can recommend is whoever it is that you like to listen to, you like what they're sharing, you resonate with them, reach out to that person. I don't care who they are. Reach out to that person and start trying to find out as much as you can from them.
We moved to a new city, and I did that a lot. I would reach out to people, way more successful. And you'll be surprised, I think, how many people will take the time to actually, they don't bother them every week to meet up, but like they'll take a meeting or they'll take a call and could probably give you some perspective on things. I think, too, people, when you get stuck in your own head and you're worried, maybe you take that risk and it doesn't work out. But there's a huge risk to not taking action, too, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think you just nailed it, right? Like, there is a risk both ways. And I think that's important for people to conceptualize, to really think about is, if I go down this road, I'm going to get this. If I go down that road, I'm going to get this, but I won't get that. And when it comes to risk, people are like, how come everybody else wins? Well, they're taking a certain amount of risk. And it's important to look at your own situation. I've got a wife and 4 kids. I take a different type of measured risk than someone who's single and has no kids.
Most people, too. The risk when you start out, it seems big, but it is almost non-existent. Because if you're here and you go to here, it doesn't matter. Once you actually build something, it gets a lot harder to then take the risk, because then you're going all the way back, right? The risk from zero isn't there. If you're
But that's an ego risk, though.
Yeah.
Don't you think so? Like, because once you get further on, like one of the things I've come to realize is you get afraid. You're afraid to lose. But I actually know when it comes to financially, I could lose everything and build it up faster than I did the first time around. It took me 50 years. I could go do this thing again because now I've got all this knowledge, connections, all of these things, and gumption that you can even go faster, as opposed to if you're thinking, oh no, I might lose this. That's ego driven.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like my business coach described it to me this way. He said, if you go to a casino with $100 and you keep doubling and doubling and doubling it, that it's not hard at the beginning, so you lose 100. Once you get to 100,000, that's hard to double that. But really, you walk out with the same amount.
Yes.
When you start, like I thought of this when I started my first business was a gym, and I thought, if this doesn't work, I just go get a job like everyone else, and my life just doesn't actually change. But then you get to some level of success, and it's like, ooh, the reputation goes, I'd have to downsize the house. All the stuff that goes along with it play into that risk appetite, I think, and it definitely. So, but at the beginning, you have the freedom of not having that. You have no risk. There's essentially no risk. What are you losing? You go back to your same exact life, none the wiser. No one in 10 years is going to look back and say, remember when he tried that business and it failed? No one cares. No one will remember except you.
I think the beauty is that if you're risk averse, then you can take measures to increase your knowledge, increase your experience. You can go do that. A lot of people would, like the banks would call me risky. And I consider the banks risky. I'm amazingly risk averse. I hate losing. I don't want to lose, And so I'm going to study, I'm going to learn, I'm going to ask, hey, Shane, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think about this? Do you see any sides to it? I'm going to do that due diligence so that I don't lose. Meanwhile, if I was to give my money to the bank, the person who I give the money to doesn't even know where the money's going in most cases. They start showing you sheets and, okay, this is the stuff. Well, what is that? I don't know. right? So you and I are actually more risk averse than a lot of these institutions. And so as a result, we just tend to do more due diligence. And for those of you that are listening that are like, oh, that seems risky. No, you are the risk.
So I love real estate for that reason. It's a tangible asset. You know, you can, to me, it's not risky. A lot of people are, and then they'll invest in the stock market. You know, the reality is if just Nvidia crashed tomorrow, everybody's hurting bad, or there's like, and you have no idea
Billions,
what's really going
trillions.
on. Yeah, I think that's great. Well, I think you've given us a lot today, a lot of good stuff. For the people, let's say they're listening and they want you to be the guy they want to reach out to, like you had mentioned, that they like listening to and want to reach out, how can they get a hold of you, or what's the best way to get information?
But I'm on TikTok, Neil_D'Souza. I'm out there. Although there are lots of Neil D'Souzas out there because, I'm originally East Indian, and D'Souza is like Smith, except there's more of us because we keep having babies. But, you can find me on social media. I'm pretty much on every platform. So, yeah, look for Neil D'Souza.